Our reading today comes from the Gospel of Mark, the 13th chapter. I'm going to read today from the Message translation of this text, and I would love for you to follow along on screen or simply listen. As Jesus walked away from the temple, one of his disciples said, "Teacher, look at the stonework, those buildings." Jesus said, "You're impressed by this grandiose architecture? There's not a stone in the whole works that is not going to be in a heap of rubble." Later, as he was sitting on the Mount of Olives in full view of the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew got him off by himself and asked, "Tell us, when is this going to happen? What sign will we get that things are coming to a head?" And Jesus began, "Watch out for doomsday deceivers. Many leaders are going to show up with forged identities claiming, 'I'm the one.' They will deceive a lot of people. When you hear of wars and rumored wars, keep your head and don't panic. This is routine history and no sign of the end. Nation will fight nation and ruler fight ruler over and over. Earthquakes will occur in various places. There will be famines, but these things are nothing compared to what's coming." Okay, fair warning, the next couple of minutes contain educational content. In the year 66 of the Common Era, there was massive unrest in the center of Roman Judea. Nationalist Jewish factions took up arms and overtook the military garrison in Jerusalem. In September of that year, the Romans in Jerusalem surrendered and were subsequently lynched. In the year 70 of the Common Era, a mass of heavily armed Roman soldiers surrounded Jerusalem to put down the insurrection that had begun 4 years earlier. In August of that year, Jerusalem was overrun and the Jewish temple was destroyed. Josephus, a Jewish Roman historian, described the scene at the temple. Using his own words, this is what he said: "As the legions charged in, neither persuasion nor threat could check their impetuosity. Passion alone was in command. Crowded together around the entrances, many were trampled by their friends. Many fell among the still hot and smoky ruins of the colonnades and died as miserably as the defeated. As they neared the sanctuary, they pretended not even to hear Caesar's commands and urged the men in front to throw in more firebrands. The partisans were no longer in a position to help. Everywhere was slaughter and fight. Most of the victims were peaceful citizens, weak and unarmed, butchered wherever they were caught. Round the altar, the heaps of corpses grew higher and higher, while down the sanctuary steps poured a river of blood, and the bodies of those killed at the top slithered to the bottom." Oh man! Yeah, that is a historian's first-hand account of this event. It's a little graphic, but you can't really understand today's reading, our story for today, without understanding this event which the early Jewish Christian community was living through. This was in their history. So Matthew writes that one day Jesus is with his disciples in Jerusalem, and they are admiring the beauty and impressive nature of the temple, the home of God, the center of Jewish worship and civic life. This building and what it stands for grounds the Jewish people's entire way of being. It's a source of their identity. But after a bit, Jesus turns and says, "Yeah, everything you're admiring, everything you've placed your hope in, well, that's going away. And on top of that, expect a whole lot of other bad stuff. But in spite of this, know that you are not lost to God." This kind of writing that we read is technically called apocalyptic literature and is written for people who are experiencing great hardship, loss, and suffering. It's written to remind you that God walks with you and will bring about life in spite of hate and violence and suffering. That was an important life-giving message in first century Jerusalem. It still an important and life-giving message for us right now. So, did you like that little history lesson? It's interesting. I think history is always interesting. But is this story impactful? Does it help you live in an intentional, complete, purposeful life connected to God and connected to others? Or is this just another example of church people like me talking about God instead of inviting people to really experience the presence of God? I like attending events with my kids. I don't do that enough, which is why I think it's really good and important that we do have opportunities for families to come together at Bethlehem, even if that has changed a bit during these COVID years. When families do gather for a ministry event, one of my favorite icebreaker questions for parents is this: what do you miss most about being a kid? That's what I ask parents to think about. I like hearing how people respond, and many kids love to hear about their parents' experiences when they were young. And I've asked this question enough that I almost know what to expect, almost always. What do you think is the most common answer to this question? What do you miss most about being a kid? I mean, do you have any guesses? I mean, share those right now, I think, with the people who are watching this with you. Or if you're by yourself, just think about that in your mind. What do you think people say? What would you say? Almost all of the reasons that I have heard have to do with the absence of worry, being carefree in life, not being stressed. That's what I always hear. So 2 things. First, I need to point out that many kids do not have, nor will they ever have, a carefree, low-stress life. And it's worse now as the last few years of COVID has disrupted school and family schedule, and all of this has taken a toll. And I want to acknowledge that. And secondly, number 2, the fact that so many people answer the question this way in different congregations, in different states, since I started asking it over 15 years ago, well, that tells me that there has been, is, and will be a lot of you who are stressed and worried about many things. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're going to say, Chad, that is so obvious. In fact, it's an understatement. Tell us something that we don't know. And I know, I get it, but I needed to name that out loud for everybody. Some of those worries that you carry are considered normal stressors, right? Busyness, time-related stressors, financial-related stressors. Who isn't stressed about that? Life satisfaction, direction, purpose-related stressors. But some of the stressors that we're experiencing, that you're experiencing, are more than that, and really not indicative of every generation. It's not just a normal human thing. Younger individuals debate whether or not to have kids as they worry about a growing climate crisis. And those who have young children often are very concerned about what their kids will inherit. Parents worry not just about their kids struggling to fit in, but actually being targeted by a social media smear campaign from fellow students where a reputation is forever destroyed in the simple push of a button. I mean, that didn't even happen when I was a kid. So Thanksgiving's coming up, and you just know that Uncle Bob is going to bring up politics, and it's going to cause a big blow up because your family is not on the same page and you are not sure if you should even go because Grandma's health is already pretty bad and you don't want to give her COVID, but then you have to find time to get a COVID test and you really don't have a lot of time and you're already stressed because you can't keep track of what activities your kids do that require you to wear a mask and which ones don't. And oh my God, can we not just go back to a time when things were so much easier? People are stressed and worried. I get it. And for the lucky ones who have had a good childhood, it's great to look back and remember the days of living in the carefree, no stress zone of safety. In today's reading, the temple functions just in that way. It's a no-stress zone of safety where God meets God's people. We all have temples in our lives, those places and people where we feel secure and good. It's those times where everything seems to be going right, those family gatherings that are filled with care and support. To the college student living away, the temple in the gospel story is like this. It's going back and being welcomed at home. To the married couple, the temple is relying fully on your spouse and trusting that he or she will be there for you through thick and thin. To the first-time expectant parent or grandparent, the temple is the promise of a new chapter in life, filled with possibilities, cuteness, and that new baby smell. Not the bad smell, the good smell. The temples in our lives are those things that ground us, that give us hope and purpose and a reason for living. But the hard truth of life that Jesus lays out is that as we are looking, admiring, and giving thanks to all those temples in our lives, Jesus turns and says to us that it doesn't last. Sooner or later, the temples in life, the carefree, no-stress zones of safety, they come falling down. It is absolutely devastating when our temples are burned to the ground. What does that look like? It's the first Thanksgiving after your divorce, and you are miserable because it's awkward. No one knows what to say. People are avoiding you, and all you want to do is just crawl into a hole. It's the first Christmas after Dad died, and nothing is the way that it should be. Nothing is right. There's a piece of your heart missing, and you wonder if it will ever feel normal again. It's coming back to the place where you grew up and realizing everything has changed. The house you grew up in looks nothing like it did because the family who now owns it has changed it. The park you played in is gone. So are your friends and family. They moved on long ago. It's a familiar place, and yet you realize that there is nothing here for you anymore. It's a woman running to the bathroom and quickly realizing that she is miscarrying, and then through tears and a choking voice having to tell her partner and friends and family that the hopes and dreams of what could have been would no longer be. When the temples in our lives come down with smoke and fire, when hope dies, when that which grounds us, centers us, gives us a reason for being is taken away, well, good Lord, then what? Seriously, then what? And Jesus, he turns to his disciples, past, present, and future, and says, "You are in my care. I will be with you. You will be saved. You won't be sorry. Nothing of you will be lost." That is the promise of God that is made in Matthew, Mark, and Luke's telling of this story. It's our call that we have received together as a community of Christians and as individual Christians to continue to reach out and walk with those in our lives who are experiencing the joys and sorrows of a life that we cannot control. This is the good news that we hear today. Thanks be to God, because God meets us just where we are. Amen. So after hearing the reading and reflection on that reading, here are a couple questions for you to journal about or discuss with anybody who's worshiping with you today. Question number 1, what do you miss most about being a kid and why? It's my favorite question. So think about that for a moment. And number 2, how are you dealing with change in your life right now? Does your faith help you or give you hope when everything feels out of control?